Hello, everybody. This is episode 18 of the Hallowed Horror Podcast. My name is Michael Robertson Jr., and of course, I have with me this morning, my co-host, Mr. Jason Collins.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
We're doing this in morning today. It's a different recording time for us.
I know. I was so ingrained to say this evening, and I just completely screwed up the intro because of that. It's so weird. There's daylight coming through the windows. If you're watching on Patreon, you can see sunlight through my window. Just a whole different vibe. It's kind of thrown me off for a horror podcast to be filmed in the day like this. But
yeah, I guess so. We had some life happen this week. You know, things are happening, and we just couldn't record on our normal night as far as like a schedule is concerned. So we're doing it this morning, and then right after this, I'm going to pack up and I'm heading to Richmond, which is about a 3-hour drive for a wedding.
Are you doing video wedding today or photo?
Photos today.
Okay. Got it.
Yep.
People are having weddings. That's interesting. And it's been kind of a weird situation for you in the photography business. Not just you, but the entire photography business.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is actually my first wedding this year. Outside of, I had a winter wedding in January, and that was before really everything kind of got locked down.
Right.
And that's been it. So I've had to reschedule 9. I think it's 9 weddings so far.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's been rough, but this wedding is keeping it under the 50 people mark, and so I'm excited. It's gonna be fun.
Cool. Very cool. My industry has been largely unaffected by this situation, just because I think it may have actually been increased. People are staying at home and just reading more books. But
I was gonna say, I bet you're getting a little bummed just because people don't have anything else to do outside.
It is interesting. Speaking on that note about the books, I'm going to attempt to do something today actually I did do it several years ago before I even had any type of equipment or understand what I'm doing. I've got 2 short stories in my main series, my Lance Brody series, and almost all of the novels are available on audio. They've been professionally narrated. They're out on Audible and all the other audiobook stores. But I've got 2 short stories that I am going to attempt to narrate myself, just to see if I can do it. And because they're short, I think it'd be fun, and just to kind of put them out there for the readers. So I might try to knock one of those out today, or at least start one of those today. So that could be interesting.
That's fun. You've done that before, so and you probably didn't even have the audio equipment that you have now, so it'll probably sound a lot better.
Yeah, that's what I was saying a minute ago before I even really had anything worth even doing it. So I'll be curious to see how it works. I'm just got the itch to do something different.
Now, I enjoyed your other ones though. You've done what, 1 or 2, and I enjoyed listening to them.
1 or 2 what exactly?
Other short stories. You've narrated
just the one. Yeah, the one several years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, it was Kill Game. That was gosh, I bet you it's been almost 8 years ago now. So it's been a while.
Yeah. Well, that'll be cool. Good luck with that.
Thanks. We'll see if I throw this thing across the room and get frustrated. So, what else has been going on before we get into this? Oh, so last episode we talked about we were getting ready to go do something pretty exciting for us anyway. We were going to a double feature at a drive-in movie theater to see Jaws followed by Jurassic Park. We were concerned if we could actually keep our old asses awake that long, because we knew we'd be getting home about 2:30 in the morning. And we went, and it was amazing.
It was so much fun. And we didn't even have to pile up on caffeine or anything. I mean, we sat through, and we sat in the car the whole time. There was a lot of people outside, but the experience was really cool. I mean, just driving up, there was this giant theater in there, and the whole hill was tiered, which was really cool. And then they had like lanes that you could pull into, like tiny driveways, and then you'd pull into I guess a port of sorts where you had in between speakers, and you would pull up on a hill. And so we even had a big truck that was in front of us. We were in row 2, and even on the hill with the way everything was tiered, you could see right over the truck. It was really, really well thought out as far as that's concerned. So it was really interesting just to see how those things functioned and worked. And the double feature was a lot of fun. We had, like I said, Jaws and Jurassic Park, and you just tune into like the radio on the station that they're broadcasting. So you've got this great sound just coming through the car, and it was just so much fun and really comfortable. I enjoyed it. I will definitely be doing that again.
Yeah, I think for the right kind of film, it's a good experience. It is definitely, I mean, just like the movie theater, which I'm not going to get on that rampage tonight. It
Yeah,
is
please
more
don't.
of an experience type thing. And you know, for these two films, I mean, talk about your perfect like summer blockbuster. Go hang out, watch some awesome movies. I mean, Jaws, again, my favorite movie of all time. Jurassic Park, on my list of favorite movies of all time. I mean, it was just an amazing, fun time, and you know, it was just really something unique. I've never done it before. I know there's probably people listening to this podcast that, you know, maybe grew up or, you know, were when drive-ins were big and, you know, they were a thing and they're listening to you describe one. It's like, you know, okay, thanks kid for telling me how a drive-in works. But, you know, like,
Right.
you know, I mean, it was new for us. We've never done it. There's not many of them left. I mean, there's only a handful, I think, in the state of Virginia where we are. And so this one was close enough, and I just couldn't resist, you know, seeing Jaws. If we were going to do it, you know, why not go big with that? And a lot of people, I don't know a lot, there were a handful of people that left after the first movie, that left when Jaws ended. And, you know, there was even part of me that was just like, man, I got to get ready to sit through a whole nother movie. And then once the movie started, I was like, oh, yeah, this movie's really good. I want to sit back and watch this again. So, yeah, completely comfortable in the car, and it was fun. It was definitely one of those experience type things. I think I talked to you about it in while we were there. I don't know if it's something we recorded for the vlog that we're going to put over on Patreon about that night that we had. But I was saying how this would have been something I think we would have done a lot in high school if there was one available. You know, just to get together with some friends or your date, you know, and just go to the drive-in. I think that would have been really cool. But anyway, it was fun, and you're putting that video together. That should be available sometime in the next week or so, I would guess.
Oh yeah, for sure. Next week,
Yep.
probably.
We'll put that up over on Patreon so you guys can live our drive-in experience with us. And apologies if at the end we're both zombies because it was like 2:00 in the morning. But anyway, Jason, what is tonight's movie that we're discussing?
Well, this morning's movie that we're discussing is
Whatever. I'm never going to get it right.
all right. Today we're discussing a Korean horror film, and which I've actually seen a lot of people just call K horror.
Is that a thing?
Realize there was a name for it.
Well, there's K-pop, so maybe
There
that
is
is
K-pop,
maybe
yeah.
that is a K-horror. Okay.
Yeah, so we're watching a K horror tonight, or talking about a K horror this morning. It's titled "Warning: Do Not Play," and it was directed and written by Kim Jong-win. And we're going to probably leave the names to that. We might try the main character's role, but I just really don't want to butcher their names.
Sure.
So this was actually the third film that was both directed and written by Kim Jong-win. He had a big movie called The Butcher in 2007 that got a lot of praise. Did you hear anything about that?
I didn't. I only saw on some of the reviews that I was reading on this film, there was at least one person that called out that movie, and they were really excited that there was going to be another movie by this guy. In 2007, it's 13 years ago. It's been a while.
Yeah, that movie got, like I said, it got a lot of praise. There was a bit of like a cult following to it. It had a lot of. It was a first person film about two people being tortured, and so it apparently the people being tortured were wearing helmets that had cameras in them, and then the torturers were filming everything on handheld cameras. So it was like a really gruesome but super well done movie.
It sounds kind of terrifying, to be honest with you. But
Yeah,
you think it's
Yeah,
like
I mean,
you think it's like a gore porn, like back in the Saw Hostel kind of genre?
had to be. I mean, how would you make that any interesting at all without being just a
Yeah.
gore film?
Yeah. Interesting.
So that was his first one that's that's at least listed on IMDb, and then there was another one called The Black Line in 2009, and I don't know anything about that, but apparently it was not well received as The Butcher because I didn't hear anybody talking about it. So this is his third movie, and
Quite a gap
it was-
still.
what's that?
It's quite a gap still. But I mean, 2009 until now, what's he been doing all this time?
Yeah, who knows? I didn't see any other credits for producing or writing or anything beyond that. So, yeah. So this movie was released in South Korea in August of 2019. Now we are pretty sure that this is a Shudder exclusive. Am I right?
Yeah, everything that we looked at online, all the services that you can, all the sites that you would go to for video on demand stuff, they all just kind of point you back to a Shudder subscription. So yeah, I believe it is a Shudder exclusive, at least in the United States.
Mm-hmm. And so it released over there in pieces over there, and then I'm not sure when it became available over here. It feels like it was just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I only recently saw Shudder start to promote it on their social media a couple weeks ago because we did the trailer impressions episode where we talked about it the same week that I saw the trailer pop up in the socials.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it has been fairly recent.
Okay.
What do you mean they released it in pieces over there?
No, just over that continent. I mean,
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Territorial wise, they were spreading it out.
Right.
Got
exactly. That's what I meant.
Got it.
And so this is a runtime of 86 minutes. It wasn't a terribly long movie. It felt like the right length, and it had an IMDb rating of 5.1 out of 10 based on 271 reviews. So not a ton of reviews, and on a five out of 10, that's decent, I guess. It's people didn't love it, but people didn't hate it.
No, I don't. Well, it's not to get off on a review train again, but it's almost like, again, with this day and age, it's like there's the middle ground for people is almost pointless at this point. Like, even if I look at the video game industry too, like if you
Mm-hmm.
look at like ING video game ratings,
Mm-hmm.
it's like 100, 99, 98, 97 are great, and then 94, 90, 87 garbage. Like, it's like
Right.
the scale has just gotten too big. I mean, it almost like they should just resort back to like a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I enjoyed this, I didn't enjoy this, and just leave it at that, because it just gets so muddled. Like this one, 5.1. I mean, it's basically just saying half the people liked it and half of them didn't.
Yeah. So real quick, we'll go through the quick synopsis straight from IMDb. So the main character's name is Mi Jung. I'll go with that. And I'll give the actor the name here. I'll try it. It's So Yi Ji. We'll go with that.
Okay.
So, anyways, this main character is Mi Jung. She is a rookie film director, and she has been preparing a horror film for the past 8 years. One day, Mi Jung hears about a movie which was banned. So, Mi Jung wants to know about the film. She begins to search for the movie. Her search takes her to meet Jae Hoon, who is the director of the film. Jae Hoon warns Mi Jung to forget about this film, but she ignores his warnings, and Mi Jung's obsession with the movie leads to bizarre and horrible situations. So that was the synopsis. That was the same synopsis I read on our trailer impression, and it's sort of accurate.
Yeah, it is. That synopsis is about as much as you can get from when you watch the trailer, where you're not really sure what exactly is going on. And to be completely honest, I've watched the film, which we both have, obviously, and I enjoyed it. I'm still not exactly sure what ultimately happened in this movie. All I know is I really enjoyed watching it.
Yeah, I did enjoy watching it. It was not an easy watch, though. I don't think you really had to pay attention to what was going on. There was a lot of blurring of lines as far as between reality and what was going on in her head. And I don't know. There was a lot of back and forth between things and jumping around in time. And it was not an easy watch. I don't think this is not one that you can just sit back and relax. And if you miss like 5 minutes, you probably miss something important.
Yeah, and I will say that the confusion around some of the plot points in this film, for me at least, nothing about this movie that made it difficult to watch or understand had anything to do with the language being different or the subtitles. That It was all just from the way the story was told. You really had to pay attention, and that's something I want to talk about. I mean, so your synopsis is the simplest synopsis really is, we have a filmmaker who has now been put on a deadline to turn in a script for a horror film. She's trying to come up with a story idea. She gets this tip about this movie that apparently this college kid created, that he screened it. People freaked out. One guy had a heart attack. They basically banned the film at that point. It was archived away forever. She goes seeking it. She finds the creator. She finds the movie. And in her understanding, in her exploration of what happened, weird stuff starts to happen to her. She also has a bit of a haunted past herself with some mental health issues, trying to hurt herself, things like that play a bit of a role in this as well. Although I'm not exactly sure what it had to do with anything except for this entity kind of using that against her to a certain degree. But
I'd agree with that.
So it's a pretty simple plot. However, the way the story is told, which it's almost a double-edged sword for me and to a certain degree, the way the story was told was really creative. The way that they shifted, the actual narrative that was like the highly produced, clean imagery mixed in with her watching what they assume is the behind the scenes footage that they find of this film being made, which ultimately turns out to be the film that was made. And then also showing us that footage full screen as if we are living it while it was being filmed and happening. It got a little jarring, but I really liked the creativity of taking all these different types of storytelling techniques and showing them.
Yeah. Now, before we move any further, listeners, this will be we'll have some spoilers in this episode, as we normally do. So
I guess I don't know if I'm spoiling or not because I don't know what the hell happened, but, to a certain degree. But
if you haven't watched the movie, go ahead and pause us now. Go watch the movie. Come back later. And but this is your official warning for some spoilers. Now, you just mentioned a few different aspects, right? You've got what's going on in her. She's wandering around trying to find the film. We're also seeing what we think is some behind the scenes footage, right? And then it goes into like the full screen where we're seeing the actual film. But there's one other aspect to it as well. We're also seeing what she's seeing through her camera at times as well, because what she was seeing in real life and what she was seeing through her phone camera was not always the same either. So that added a ton of complexity to producing and visually telling this story. And while I think they did a good job, I was definitely confused at times.
Yeah. The cell phone camera, I think the biggest point to that was using it in the classic kind of horror trope, if you will, of showing that, cameras are incapable of actually capturing spirits, the ghosts, the hauntings or whatever, versus what the human being is seeing. I think that was the biggest reason for that. One other thing that this movie did a lot, and you can talk about a little bit from a filmmaking perspective, how many scenes in this movie were her walking through a place with her cell phone camera lighting the way in her apartment, in the theater. I mean, a lot of this film was shot that way.
Yeah, it was. And it was just a very dimly lit, dark movie. I have my monitor is calibrated to what we call is crush the blacks a little bit, so it doesn't go black. It brings it back up a little bit, and so I could whenever I see that, like the way that looks, it almost kind of looks like a really, really dark gray is what it does. I can immediately know that was meant to be black. Something was going on, and there was a lot of that. There was a lot of dark in this movie. And when she would turn on her flashlight and walk around, I'd love to know how they light that. I don't know if they put something on the front of it, that like a tiny little light that turns on too, or if when she's pointing the flashlight at the camera, if they just have a white bounce card that's flashing back and lighting her face up a little bit.
Yeah.
But every time she turned on that light, her face would light up too, so we could see her. But we talked about found footage films a lot. And so this movie had like a nice balance of both, right? It had that really well produced kind of film going on. And then there was also a good amount of found footage where it's like you have that anxiety of like, you can only see what the camera's seeing or what that person is choosing to look at. So I really enjoyed the back and forth, and that was really well done.
You know what one of my all-time favorite horror movies did something very similar? It was a very good mix of the narrative mixed with the found footage. Blumhouse produced it 6-7 years ago. Ethan Hawke. Sinister.
Oh, yes.
All the tapes that he found of the previous families and how they were murdered. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Did the exact same thing. Really built the dread with what you were seeing there. Yeah, so that this did a really good job. I really, from the creativity standpoint, I really enjoyed mixing up the narrative and the different tools that they used to tell this story, because it could have been straight vanilla narrative. I mean, they could have relied on her just chasing down these clues and kind of, getting to the theater and learning things about what happened without such a reliance on the found footage. And I think it really just made it a stronger movie, especially once you figured out the bit of a plot twist, which is basically all the horrific events that happened while this crew went in to film this movie, with these people getting killed in the theater. That's the footage that this guy actually took to make his quote unquote movie, which is ultimately why he was losing his mind. The guilt and the so called kind of haunting of the girl from the theater. Which brings me to a point. What exactly was the deal with the ghost, the spirit from the theater? Like, clearly she's there and she's haunting the theater and she's killing these people because of, she died in a horrific accident while filming a movie. Why was the director of this film, I mean, I guess you could see why he was so riddled with guilt and all this issue with the movie that he made, because he basically made a snuff film is what he did. I mean, he filmed his friends and his crew getting killed and turned it into a film for profit and notoriety, and he couldn't live with that. But it seemed to be that he was haunted by this spirit of this girl. And then once our main character took the film from him and brought it into her own house and her own life, she seemed to be kind of haunted by this spirit as well. So I guess my question is, from the storytelling perspective, how was this spirit able to move and leave the hotel and go with these people? Is she attached to the film somehow? Does she latch on to the people that enter the theater? I couldn't understand why she was also in their lives and not just at the movie theater.
Yeah, you were made to think that she was trapped in the theater, and anytime anybody came into the theater, that's when she would cause bad things to happen. It was a haunting movie, right?
Yeah.
It was a ghost story. But you're right. It seemed like after he didn't actually film all these things, but everything just happened to be recorded because they were getting ready to record that day, and then bad things started happening.
Right.
And it was almost like a possession is the wrong word. They were never possessed. It was more, because it was weird the way when the final film showed from the first one in the theater, like he smiled about it, like he was happy about something. So that led me, that almost made me think that he was somehow possessed by her. Like she had maybe gone into him, and like she was happy things were going on. And then when she left him, at that point is when the guilt set in. And then it was almost the same thing with her. It was almost like she took over the girl that was trying to make this new movie. And we never actually saw where maybe she left. She seemed to be pretty content with what was happening.
Yeah.
So maybe it was a possession. Maybe that's how it happened.
Maybe, but you would almost think that if it was so let's assume that she was possessed once she had acquired the tape or watched it, almost like kind of The Ring back in the day. You watch it and you die 7 days later or whatever it was. Like maybe, the possession comes by absorbing the content. Why did she go back to the theater? Why would she, as a possessed person with this girl inside her now, still continue this hunt and this trying to figure out what happened and go back to the movie theater? That was one aspect I didn't get, was how this ghost could just free roam. And you're right, at the end of the movie, that's kind of like the big cliffhanger ending, the way that her eyes kind of light up with the flashes of the photographers and stuff happening. Like, is she not? They definitely implied that she is possessed by this ghost of this girl that she thought she had, destroyed at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But if that was the case, why did the spirit ever leave the first director? Because he was clearly distraught. I mean, he was obviously a wreck. And I don't know. I mean, that was the confusing part to me, is what was this ghost motive and how did she operate exactly?
Yeah. Well, from his perspective, he had a bit of a story to tell, because he said a couple things like, if you have religion, go find it. Maybe he meant that very literal. Maybe religion helps to keep the ghost away from him. And that's why he was just in that hole with all of the crosses. And and that was just helping the possession stay out of him.
Yeah.
And then he was warning her to say, you need to find some, otherwise, bad things are going to happen. And then when they got to the theater, when he came to the theater and she was there, he acted like, what did he say? Did you think you could fool me?
He thought that she was possessed. Yeah. I mean, he 100% thought that
she was by then. Maybe she was the one that was driving her to go to his place and find the film. I mean, maybe she was kind of pushing that along the whole time, the ghost.
Right. Yeah, but she didn't have any contact with the theater yet, did she? Before she reached out to the director? She hadn't gone to the theater until after she saw the film, right? Or reached out to him. I think ultimately there is supposed to be some sort of possession here. Although if she was possessed, why is she seeing the ghost in her apartment? Like, wouldn't she just be inside her?
Because she maybe it's just the film itself, because she had taken that bit of footage from the
Film Festival Institute.
Exactly. Yeah. She went to the film festival. They unarchived it, or she unarchived it and put it on her thumb drive. So she was able to get a clip of it. And maybe the clip was maybe the ghost is tied to the movie, like you said. So wherever the movie goes, whoever sees the movie is then, susceptible.
Maybe. I mean, that's the only way it really makes sense in my head. So and that's the only way it's going to work for me anyway. But, and again, this is one of those situations where I just didn't fully understand exactly what was happening in this movie. I liked watching it. Everything I was seeing, I was enjoying. It definitely had a very creepy, vibe to it. I loved the found footage aspect of it. I loved the mystique of it all. I still just don't really know what happened. The climax was, while it was action filled, it was still scary. Like it didn't shift like some horror movies do from a creepy narrative to just an action thriller with the ghost elements as the antagonist. To me, it was still very creepy the way that it was portrayed. Again, and with her using the phone camera and seeing the things that she's not really sure if they're real life or not. Like, it was all really clever. The other thing that really confused me a little bit, though, was the timeline in this, because sometimes she acted like she was seeing things she'd already seen before, and you weren't really sure how she had seen them yet. Like, some of her dream sequences that she was having, like, I don't know, the narrative just got murky to me, and I don't know if I had read it, if I can read the screenplay, if it makes more sense versus what I actually saw. I've said that before, but yeah, the narrative was a little murky, just a little confusing. But overall, I thought it was a really fun movie. And I think it just kind of shows again that, there's some really good horror that has come out of Korea and is continuing to come out of horror. Not just horror, but films in general. We talked about Parasite, winning the Oscar this year. It was good. I enjoyed it. By the way, I really loved the color with like the red light when she was at the director's apartment or whatever. I thought that whole tint of that scene just really made it look demonic. Like, there was just something off with this place.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, the coloring, going back to actually just the production of the film, the cinematography was top notch in this film. I mean, it was really, really well done. Going back to what you were saying, that she was seeing things that she had not seen yet. You're talking about when she was in the actual theater, right?
Yes. Well,
I think that was the theater. I think that was the ghost, like, showing her, like, either the possession had happened and she was sort of seeing things, because there was this one little quick scene where it almost seemed like the ghost came out of her or through her.
Yeah,
it was really strange.
It was when the guy got hung
happened.
up by the noose, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and then there was the other scene down in the basement where
it wasn't that one. I'm sorry, it was the guy it was the dude that had the pipe like shoved in his mouth.
Right. Yeah. He had just we were watching the guy slam his face into the wall,
which she had seen that before on the film when she watched it.
Right. She had seen like bits and pieces of it, but not the full scene like she was seeing. And so it was really odd. She came down and it was almost like you're right about like time shifting. It was like she walked into when everything was happening, you know, and they could interact with her. That was even the weirder part, right?
Right.
She was like, "You can see me," and he was like, "Yeah," and then the bad things happened. It was really, really strange. Again, blurring those lines between not only timeline, but what was reality and what was not. And it while it was it was fun to watch. It was very confusing.
Yeah, that's the word I keep going back to. That scene you're talking about, though, where they're interacting with her, I don't think that they were, because when she was watching the film, when she had found it, that guy turns around and he's like, "Who are you? You know, who are you?" And she's like, "Who's he talking to?" You know, she was kind of trying to figure that out herself. And then when she relives the scene, he turns around and she thinks that he's talking to her, but then the ghost, you can see it kind of splits her. It comes from behind and then kind of goes around her and then goes forward. So I think the guy in the movie was actually seeing the spirit, and that's what she saw.
Okay. And she just happened to be in the eyesight or the
Right.
line.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
But it was confusing when you're watching it, because I thought the same thing. Because then I was like, oh my God, this is getting real damn trippy. Like, was she somehow in here before and they filmed her and she didn't know it? Like, was there like some? I was already confused, and then I was like, well, no idea what's happening now. I don't understand how any of this fits together.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a cool movie. I did enjoy the way that they made it so that, because the original director kept indicating that, oh, I didn't make the movie, it was the ghost that made the movie. And while that might be true, it sort of explained how like found footage film, like, usually it's just like, oh, like who, sometimes it's like, oh, who found it, who did this, who edited it, kind of thing. And this was kind of interesting, where it was like everything was recorded, whether it be by cameras that were set up, or him doing it himself. But he took it back and edited the whole thing. Like, he was the one that did all the editing and created the actual film.
Yeah. By being made by a ghost, really the only thing he could say is she provided all the action. She did all the narrative. Like, I mean, he just filmed what she did and then pieced it together.
She was the director, and he was the editor.
Yeah. Which is kind of, again, it's kind of like one of those things that bummed me out a little bit. Like, this movie's premise was really exciting. When they were talking to her, the student filmmakers, and they were like, yeah, did you hear that story about the movie that was made by a ghost? Like, that is such an intriguing premise. Like, that is a hook that will win everything. And then when you get to the end and you see what really happened, like, once you learn the truth, you are kind of let down. Like, the ghost didn't make the movie. Like, and even the guy in the director of the original movie, when he is just so disheveled and out of his mind, like, even the reasoning for that and the understanding of that, the mystique of it fades away as you get toward the end. What starts out as a really interesting, scary premise turns into basically just a psychological, like, explanation for everything, with a ghost that is actually there. So, the premise didn't exactly get paid off on the end, if you ask me, but I don't know how you would pay it off. I mean, I didn't write it, obviously, but it was a little murky. But it was a fun watch, and it was really well made. And it makes me honestly just want to go out and search for some more K-horror, if you will. Because we talked about this when we would watch the trailer impression, or we did the trailer impression episode, how many of some of the horror movies that were made in the U.S. in the late 90s, early 2000s were basically just, reimaginings of Korean horror films like The Ring. So I bet you there's some other good stuff out there we could hunt down.
Yeah, honestly, this movie makes me want to go back and watch The Butcher. And it sounds very interesting now. I want to see if I can find that.
It's got to be somewhere. But yeah. So yeah, I mean, we said it was an IMDb rating of 5.1. It's almost the opposite for me of what the movie that we did last week. So last week with Blumhouse's You Should Have Left, I said that the visuals were striking, but the story was weak. The characters were weak. To me, I guess it's not really the opposite. To me, this is more of where the visuals were really good and the story was decent, but just left a lot to be explained. And I'm all for open endings. I'm all for some vague explanations, but I really just had a confused state of mind with the timeline of the different narratives here.
Yeah, this had a lot of different timelines. This was striking out in a lot of different directions, and it got confusing. One thing I did like, though, is I really found myself caring about the characters.
Yes.
Both her and her friend.
Yep.
I legitimately felt bad once I realized, what had happened to him, because I loved his character too. So they did a really good job of making you really care about the characters. And I think that's something that's hard to do, but also completely necessary. You need that in these kinds of films. And I think you were talking about that Stephen King said that one time. If you don't care about the characters, and you don't care about the results of those characters.
Yeah.
So this was definitely a well. I'm going to go and say it was well written. I think there was probably a solid plan in mind for where they wanted it to end, and maybe, like you said, you want to see the screenwriting, the actual script, and it might make more sense. But I don't know if they really executed it really well as far as pointing where the storyline is supposed to wrap up, and maybe explaining some things. And I think this is one of those movies where I would like some sort of explanation on like what the hell's going on, like where's the ghost, or is the ghost really in her, or what actually happened. Maybe even show a little exposition just visually at the end, of like really what's going on, or what something from the ghost's perspective of like what she's doing. I think that may have helped a little bit, but visually striking, really great, really well produced. Editing was really top notch, even though it was confusing at times. It looked really great, right? It was the way they merged between what was going on and what she was seeing, and what was in the actual like film itself was really, really cool. How you could how they were able to just go back and forth so seamlessly. And like I was saying earlier, it's sort of a hard watch. You got to be really paying attention to figure out kind of what timeline you're in, in that very second.
Yeah. And, talking about the end and the motive, maybe a little bit, the one thing that was identical to what happened in the first film that was made by the original director, and then the end result of what happened with her film, the stories are complete parallels. Whereas they were setting out to make a movie, they have a finished product, and they're the only ones involved that were still alive. Now, the difference is he just took the footage of everybody getting killed from his movie that was, set up for behind-the-scenes stuff and made it a film. She took the story and made it her own film, and he's dead, the original director, so he can't come back and say, this was my idea, this was my thing first. And her friend, who kind of knew what she was doing, is also dead. So she's the only survivor of anywhere that would understand this is a true story and what's really happening. So that was really the big parallel there. So I don't know what that means, but there was definitely a pattern in terms of what the ghost was accomplishing at the end, so to speak.
Yeah, that was that's a good point too. And it's and what was interesting was the way the difference in production too, because the first one was all found footage, and then she came out and she actually produced a brand new film that was almost identical to what we had just watched, right? It was her real life story, and I thought that was really neat too.
Well, it was identical because remember her producer friend or whatever, the guy that worked with her at the studio, he was like, how much of this is based on real life? And the answer is all of it. And she was like, who knows? Because she's the only one that knows. It's a complete narrative of everything that she just did.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a clever little end, and I get it.
It was.
I wanted just a little more clarity of what was going on. By the way, we just saw this in, what was the movie we watched with the witch in the woods? The Wretched. I get really burnt out and tired on stories or movies that lead you to believe that the main villain is dead. And then, all right, at the end, they go, oh, no, never mind. It's still alive. Like, I get so sick of that. When you see this thing supposedly destroyed, and you're like, oh, it's over. Like, what does it do? Just go lick its wounds for an hour and then come back? Like, I do really, and this movie kind of did that too, because you would think that she actually had ended that ghost's life, so to speak. So anyway, it was good. It was a fun watch. Again, Shudder is doing some awesome stuff. They're picking up a ton of great movies, and if you are a Shudder subscriber, clearly you're not out any money to watch this movie, so I'd highly recommend it if you want to go check out some Korean horror, or K-horror as I'm now told it's called. So
yeah, K-horror. Yeah, definitely a fun watch. Not an easy watch, so pick a time where you can pay attention.
Yeah, and of course with being subtitled, unless you can speak Korean, you're going to have to pay attention to even know what's being said. So it was fun. Let me give my personal rating. I'll go above the average. I'll give it a 6. 6.5. Just
yeah, I was gonna go with 7.
Yeah. Ooh. Okay. Going up.
I enjoyed it. I really liked the film.
I did too. I hate that I don't know what happened. That just bugs me. I think enough to take it down a notch for me. But
yeah, and I think after us even talking about it, I have a little more clarity, and I'm okay with actually what we think happened. You know, the fact that the ghost is not in any way tied to the theater physically, that the theater itself, just the idea of it, whether that be in the physical form or in a film, you know, of some way, that she can still go on.
Right.
And I think that's how, you know, that's why when she saw a clip of it, that she was able to then, you know, come back out and haunt her. And then, you know, with the actual movie being produced afterwards, she's still able to go on. So, you know, she's not actually tied to a place physically. She's tied to the idea of that place.
Yeah.
And, you know, as long as you're okay with that, and also that this was definitely a possession movie.
Yes.
Or at least like a Parasite kind of movie where they just tag along. Then I'm okay.
You can't say Parasite movie about Korean movies because we just had Parasite the movie. So yeah,
sorry.
But
yeah,
don't
get it mixed up.
Yeah, an actual Parasite.
Right.
That makes sense. Yeah. No, I agree. And I don't know that I'll rewatch it, but it was fun to talk about it. And like you said, maybe understand a little bit more of what had happened. And again, it's definitely worth the watch if you have a Shudder subscription for sure. So,
oh yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been episode 18 of the Hallowed Horror Podcast. We appreciate you listening. And if you want to go over to our Patreon page, patreon.com/Hallowed Horror, we should have that vlog of our drive-in experience up very soon. And of course, you get video episodes of all the podcasts as well. So have a wonderful week, and we'll talk soon. Bye.